Welcome back in. Well, as you guys can see, we are joined by a special guest right now. And really, this guy needs no introduction at all. Heisman Award winner, NFL All-Pro running back, NFL Pro Bowl running back, and a list of accolades that looks like a receipt at CVS. I cannot name them all, but it is a pleasure to have Ricky Williams here in the studio. Ricky, thanks so much for being here.
It's great to be here.
It's great to have you in here. And, you know, especially on a holiday for Mother's Day, but you were able to spend it with your family before coming in, right?
Yeah, we had a nice trip to Ace Hardware store. Got some sand for the sandbox. Yeah, we had a nice family outing today.
All right. Well, Ace Hardware store, I guess, is the place to go. Some go to Mother's Day brunch, some go to Ace Hardware. So as long as it was fun. Well, you know, Ricky, obviously one of the reasons I wanted you on here, this kind of aligns with what this month is. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And Ricky, you have become an advocate for mental health. And I guess my first question to you, Ricky, is evolving from an NFL player, from a professional athlete, and getting serious about mental health and astrology and all the things that you're doing. Can you just talk a little bit about the transition from that and how you got interested in this?
Well, I got interested because of my own mental health. You know, back in 2001, I did my first interview where I talked about my own mental health struggles. And it was the most courageous thing I've ever had to do. I mean, I've had to go against Ray Lewis and I had to go against some bad people. But to be honest about what was really going on inside of me, it took so much courage. You know, when I was a kid and I wanted to be a professional athlete, part of it was the fame and all that stuff. But another part of it, probably more important, was to have a platform. And as I became a professional athlete, I didn't really have a platform until I started to wrestle with my own demons. And then it gave me a platform to be able to take my football talent and touch people who have never played football, never will play football. And I think we all go through our mental health challenges. And when we have celebrities who are willing to speak up and share their experiences, I think it's wonderful.
It's interesting because you played a sport which is obviously known for being extremely masculine and contact and hardcore and not showing weakness. And you went out there day in and day out as probably one of the best college running backs we've ever seen and literally punished defenders. How were you able to, despite, you know, being this mythical or godlike creature or person at UT, how were you able to kind of put that aside and be able to actually internalize the troubles that you were going through and the challenges that you were going through because so many people saw you as this, you know, oh, Ricky can get through anything. He's the most, you know.
Well, I believed it too. I mean, I think this is what people say when they talk about toxic masculinity, is that we're told we're supposed to put on this hard shell and be tough and not feel anything. And that'll get you to a certain point, but eventually the feelings catch up with you. And for me, it happened when I was on center stage as a professional football player, and it was embarrassing and it was difficult. But I think the greatest challenges we face in life are what make us who we are. And like I said, I'm grateful that I went through those challenges and that I came out on the other side. I mean, I was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder. I didn't even feel like being around my teammates. I didn't feel like being around anyone. And now I can come on television and I can talk about this and talk about pretty much anything. And so I think, you know, all the things I overcame on the football field are great, but a lot of people can't relate to that. The things I overcame in life, I think are even better because more people can relate to that.
Well, the thing I think a lot of times people need to understand is that at the end of the day, yes, athletes possess these supernatural powers. They're extremely physical. You know, they have these worldly attributes, but at the end of the day, athletes are human beings, which means they have emotions. They go through mental problems just like anybody else. And it's for so many people, it's hard for them to distinguish this, you know, world athlete with world star talent that actually, you know, can go through mental challenges. So I guess when you decided to come out, you talked about that interview in the early 2000s. You know, what gave you the strength to say, okay, you know what, I'm just going to be transparent about this? Was there a moment or a clicking point where?
It was. You know, you mentioned this idea, it's a myth of what the heroes are supposed to be. And I got caught up in that myth. I thought I was supposed to be that way too. And so when I felt like there was something going on inside of me, I didn't want to tell anyone because I felt like I was a failure. And so because I was the victim of that myth, I've taken it on myself to do something about it and change it. Because I think all of the training that I did as a football player, it was preparing me not to be the best football player, because you don't take that with you. It was training me to be a better person. And if we're not willing to face our own demons and deal with them, we're not going to evolve and grow as a human being. So what I try to talk to athletes about is I say, take everything you learned on the football field and apply it to your personal life, apply it to your inner life, and you're going to have that same kind of success.
Do you feel that now colleges, and when I say colleges, athletic programs in colleges, even in professional leagues, do you feel that they're doing more now to be aware of mental health struggles and trying to provide adequate care, or do you feel that there's still a lot of work to be done?
Well, it's difficult. We live in a capitalist society, and so the bottom line is the bottom line. And we're realizing that the bottom line is benefited when we help take care of the people that work for us. And so I think the NFL is they get it. They realize if they take care of the players' mental health, it saves a lot of money in the back end. And like I said, the NFL wants to be about more than just football. And I think them taking care of the players sends a good message. But what I tell the guys, what I tell the players that I talk to, is the players have to take responsibility for their mental health. And when they do that, it forces the league to respond.
Now, I want to go back to your first retirement. You actually, during that time, you ended up enrolling at school in Grass Valley, not that far from here.
Yeah.
What inspired the decision, not just to go back to school, but to choose the particular school you went to?
It's interesting. So I retired back in 2004, and I started traveling around the world. And I got to a place where I had come to terms with the fact that I'm not going to be a football player, but it left this huge vacuum because I didn't know how to do anything else. I didn't have any training. And so I realized I do need to go back to school. And so I started thinking, like, what do I want to do with my life? And I thought about the most meaningful experiences in my life. And they were times where I was talking to someone and I had said something that helped them feel better. And so when I thought in my mind, that clicked as a healer. And so when I got back to the States, I started looking online for any kind of programs I could take so I could learn how to be a healer. And there's a program at the California College of Ayurveda up in Grass Valley, and it was enrolling at that time, and school was starting in 2 weeks. So I drove up here, never been up here, drove up here for the first time, enrolled in school, and it really set me off on my path as a healer.
That's awesome. Well, it's good to see you embrace that journey and aspect and what you're doing with it now. Now, you've also gotten into astrology, I understand.
Yeah.
And there's an app or something that you're creating. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's called Leela, and the word Leela is the Sanskrit word that means a divine play. And I believe that we're all here for a purpose. And people say that, and it's kind of cliche, but once you start to study astrology a little bit and study your astrology, you get to see your purpose and what your role is. A good example is I was a football player, but I noticed I was a little bit too sensitive for that environment. And so I left and I took the path as a healer. And my chart says I'm a sensitive guy and I should honor that sensitivity and instead of trying to put up walls and trying to suppress it. And once I started doing that, my life felt more meaningful. It wasn't the picture that I imagined, but it was something that, we'll say, the universe imagined for me, and it felt so much more resonant to me as a person.
Would you say that you feel more fulfilled now doing that than any day that you put on shoulder pads and a helmet?
Yeah, I feel like we're all built for something, and it's easy to force ourselves to do things that we're not really built for, but we suffer. And I think when we find that thing that we were built for, what we were made for, I think ups and downs, we enjoy them because we feel like we're doing our thing.
I love that. Now, it's interesting. One of the things that you kind of talked about was when you were coming out of the NFL, when you were traveling around, you're like, okay, I need to figure out what it is that I'm going to do. A lot of times, and I'm sure you've seen this, professional athletes, when they retire or they get cut or, basically when the sport is no longer their purpose, they struggle to find that next chapter of life, or they struggle to transition into that next spot in life. What kinds of advice or encouragement would you give to any athlete who is in that phase?
Yeah, travel, because, one of the things as a football player, before I traveled, I had the same interaction with everyone. They saw me as this image, like you talked about earlier. And when I started traveling to places where people had no idea who I was, I got a more real reflection of who I was. And that helped me appreciate what was truly valuable about me. And it made it easy to figure out what I want to do next with my life.
I love that. Now, just to go back to what you're doing next with your life, when we were talking prior to this interview, you said you had aspirations of getting into coaching. Obviously, you coached at University of the Incarnate Word.
Yeah.
What is it about coaching that attracts you, and why you want to eventually pursue that?
I said it was a fantasy. It's similar to an aspiration, but I don't want to go like the normal way of having to be a position coach. I want someone to appreciate that I add value and give me a shot. Because I do things differently. Like if I was the coach, I'd be looking at the charts of all my players, and I'd be interested in them as young men more than as athletes. And I think that's where the passion comes from. Just going through the experiences that I went through, the coaches that saw me as a human being and really wanted to support my journey. Football is a wonderful, wonderful tool to teach young men to be leaders. So much of what I learned about life and so much of my success on and off the field has come from the lessons I learned on the football field. And to be a person in charge of teaching the young men these things, I'd love that opportunity.
I'm sure they would love you as well. Now, you talked about the football field. Now, obviously, you know that you can, if you type Ricky Williams on YouTube, there is a plethora of plays that will come up, literally any and everything. My question to you, do you ever randomly revisit that past life and look up your old clips? And do you have a favorite play or a favorite moment from your NFL career?
I do. That's a great question. Honestly, if I'm having a bad day, I put on the old highlight films, because it lifts me up. So I remember, I'm a bad man. My favorite play, to me, it's probably not everyone's favorite play, but I understand my internal experience that led to that play. So my freshman year, it was the last game of the season, and we were playing against our rival, the Texas A&M Aggies. And at the time, they had the wrecking crew defense, the best defense in the nation, #1 defense in the nation. I was a freshman fullback, and I had to block these big linebackers all day. And so I was scared, And so the game starts, and it's a defensive battle. It's early in the second quarter, and we run a draw play, and they blitz themselves out of the play, and I pop through for like a 22-yard touchdown run. And I think just being a freshman in a big game like that and having that confidence, I ended up with 160 yards that game. As a freshman fullback, we ended up winning the game, winning the conference, and after the game, the Aggies were the #2 defense in the nation. So it was just as a young person overcoming their fear and having success was just a huge confidence builder for me.
I bet. I'm sure that's probably one clip you always look back, that 22-yard run up the gut,
Yeah.
That's good stuff there. Now, are you still a college football fan? Do you still follow the Longhorns, or you kind of just remove yourself from that?
Yeah, I can't help it. I bleed burnt orange, and so I got to follow my Longhorns. And I'll always be a purist. I love college football. Love it. And so, I think I'll be watching college football the rest of my life.
Love it. Last thing I have for you, there's a lot of people watching Ricky, especially a lot of high school football players who watch this. And, I guess my last thing to you is there can be a running back, a linebacker. There could be any football player out there right now watching who is struggling with their mental health, whether it's social anxiety or depression, what have you. But they are so afraid to go and bring it up because maybe they're the captain on the team or they're perceived in a certain way. Mm-hmm. What would you say to that kid or that young college football player out there who's really struggling?
I say find someone that you trust, that you really trust, and talk to them about it. Because the one thing is when we talk about our problems, they can't eat us up anymore. We put them out there, and you use everything you learned as a football player to go and attack those problems, and things change.
I love that. Well, that's awesome. Well, Ricky, thank you again for coming on here. We really appreciate it. And also, one other thing before we get out of here, I totally forgot to ask you. I know that you're obviously in cannabis as well, and you have some projects going on. Can you just elaborate a little bit on what you're doing there?
Yeah, and it's related to mental health, and I feel proud to say that. It's through my experience of getting to know myself better, cannabis was a great tool for me. And, I talk about being more active in our inner lives, but if we spend so much time pushing things down, we can't deal with them. And I found when I consume cannabis, it helps me become more aware of the things that are bubbling up inside. I think when people talk about the paranoia, it's just they're just getting aware of all the stuff that they spent all the years pushing down. And I think when we change our attitude and realize that cannabis can help us be in better touch with those things that are coming up, then I think we can start to appreciate the positive benefits of having a rich inner life.
Do you fear that maybe marijuana itself has been unfairly stigmatized or condemned, or for lack of better words, just seen as negatively throughout its history?
It is, and it's similar to what we've been talking about this whole time. Anything that makes us more aware of how we feel, you know, because again, we're in a capitalistic society, and so the idea is we want people working, and if people are thinking about how they feel, then they're going to be like I did. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I feel like I should be doing something else.
I love it. Well, speaking of doing, what you're doing right now is amazing. You are definitely taking the knowledge that you have learned and inspiring others with it, and just a breath of fresh air, especially for this mental health crisis that we've been in, just allowing and bringing more awareness to it so people do not feel as ashamed. So thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for your transparency. Ricky, before we get out of here, any words of advice or wisdom that you want to drop?
Life is short. Take your shot and live your best life. It's worth the effort.
I love it. You hear that? Shoot your shot. Because Ricky Williams says shoot your shot. Well, I absolutely love it.